Hello, my name's Alex. A few days ago, I went to a music festival where I caught COVID-19, and I'm now self-isolating for 10 days. Every single day throughout these 10 days, I'm going to be recording a podcast with someone interesting or cool, and I want to find out more about their passions, hobbies, and life. Hopefully, this will stop me from going insane. We'll find out together. Welcome to the Rona CHATS. Enjoy. Episode 4. We're back. I still have COVID, but it's not as bad. I'm still a bit blocked up. My sense of taste has returned, which is nice, but I'm still inside and will be until the 8th of August. So, in order to pass the time, I have the one and only Shaw Reymont, aka SDR. Shaw is a producer, mastering engineer extraordinaire who I have known technically for about 10 years. Sure, how are you feeling?
Very good, thank you. How are you? A little bit better.
Well, I'm better, yeah. How are you finding the end of the world?
It's bright and bleak all at the same time. It's wonderful and awful. It's the best of times and the worst of times.
Oh, isn't it just? Are you finding, I mean, obviously things have been lifted, but looking over like the past 14 months or so, 15 now, I think actually, like creatively, how's that kind of, how has what happened affected you? Because I know that you put out some releases and some bits here and there, right? And you've been working with some artists and like Harry, for example. How's that affected it?
Yeah. In a weird way, a lot of my personal work has been quite unaffected. I think that stems mostly from the fact that I'd call myself, I wouldn't like to call myself solitary or whatever, but like in the modern age of record production where you're a solo artist and you're like starting out as someone who was a producer who made, random beats on free software and on a laptop, you learn to become very self-sufficient and almost kind of like you create your own little island, and hence this room is just a sort of small island of music making. And so in that regard, when they're like, stay at home, I'm like, oh, wonderful. I can actually spend more time on this. But then obviously you've still got the rest of your life that's also now at home, so you end up not spending as much time. But personal musical efforts haven't been too dampened, but the stuff that I missed most was studio work and things like that. That was that real-time in-person collaboration stuff, recording people, just talking to human beings and being like, that was great, let's try something else, versus having to send notes online.
Yeah, because like yesterday, I had Lex from Hex, who's that they're kind of like electronic duo, and she was talking about how the whole COVID thing didn't really like affect her songwriting that much, because as we all kind of like, and I think you and I are quite similar in that we grew up kind of not only on the internet but working in our bedrooms only, and so I at least found with me that creatively, well, it wasn't the fact that I wasn't able to work, and it wasn't that I didn't have the drive. It was just that kind of like it was like I was running on fumes, because I like going outside and going, look at the trees. I'm going to write a song about the trees. But you know what I mean? But I mean, because you released Won't Believe, right? During lockdown. Or at least like,
yes, that was
recently.
December of 2020, and then Love Under Pressure was at some point this year. I forget. I think April
Under
of
Pressure.
2021.
Yeah. If anything, because would you say you were releasing more in lockdown?
Technically speaking, yes, but that is only because I'm probably one of the more infrequent releases in the history of this world. I just can't seem to stick to a schedule in that regard, even though I know it would be
I'm
good
the same
to do so. And yeah.
Oh man, yeah. I suppose going back, like, let's start at the beginning. A very good place to start. let's go back to Audio Tool.
I literally received an email from them today, which felt very odd.
Brilliant. For those of you who don't
It was meant to be.
know, Shaw and I, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, have technically known each other for 10 years. And that's because when we were kiddos, little I don't know, like 12, 13-year-olds, we knew each other, but we didn't know that we knew each other. There was an online music making application called Audio Tool, which was kind of like, imagine like Logic plus SoundCloud in one website, where you could write music and then share it from that platform. And so we kind of, I didn't know this until we went to uni together, and was like, oh, you were that guy, but we knew each other on there. So I'm guessing, was that like phase one of like, oh, I want to get into music, I want to try writing?
Yeah, yeah. If I was to give myself the full musical, like mini musical history of myself, it started being that my siblings always, even if they didn't continue it, at least went through some level of learning an instrument. So most of my siblings, as being one of six, I think
Crikey.
nearly all of them went through at least like some guitar lessons.
Hmm.
And I learned grade 1 guitar. That's as much as like official bona fides I have in that instrument. But my sister, just above me in age wise, she wanted to play keyboard and was trying to be different or whatever. And then, being my older sister, I was like, but she's got a different thing. I want the different thing now too. And I didn't get any keyboard lessons, but she had a keyboard, and that just meant that I nicked it off her and started just hitting notes randomly forever and ever and ever and ever. And I think guitar lesson and having an instrument around in the house definitely developed my ear strongly. I was always able to, from I'd say relatively young age, I was learning guitar in about year 5, year 6, so that would be about ages 9 to 11. Was able to hear a melody and then eventually work it out, which I just assumed it was a thing most people could do, and was then hearing people that were like, you're quite good at it. And I was like, whatever. Then, at the exact same time, I was listening to dance music, and dance music of both the current era and mostly French house from the 90s and 2000s. That's, anyone who knows me would know that. Just, it's a big and important part of my
I
development,
mean,
I'd say.
just listen to your music, and
with
it's
that,
quite apparent.
yeah, exactly. And then with that, my brother-in-law, Matt, on the side of his own work, would do DJing for house parties and things.
Okay.
And I remember one day he came round and was like, oh, do you know there's like, if you want to ever try that, there's like free software. It's called Virtual DJ. And I said, huh? My little child brain couldn't comprehend it. And so then he just installed a free copy of Virtual DJ onto the family computer that I would sit at for hours on end. And then I was like, wait, dance song and this dance song. Wait, they have drums at the start and end that you can use to put over. Oh, wait, it's like DJ mixes. And so for a while, like just the world of DJing I found fascinating, buying copies of DJ Mag and reading and watching everything I could. And then I think at one point it just clicked with me. Or what was it? It was a mixture of the Gadget Show, of all places, showed Audio Tool once.
Really?
Not kidding. I think it might have been one of the like web-only Gadget Show things that you could find on their YouTube channel or something.
Right, right.
But very briefly, they showed Audio Tool. And I was like, wait, the songs that I hear on the radio and on my iPod, they get like made in a computer? Like, young me didn't have any understanding of the idea that songs almost just existed outside of everything. Like, there was just like the music that was coming from the radio. That's just where the music came from. I knew that there were artists and people who sung and played instruments, but the song had no concept of it. If it was a file, but it was also on a disc, but
Yeah, no,
also on records. It
I
just was
totally get that. I
a
remember when
thing.
I remember when I started, well, because like you, I started DJing, and it was like, oh, I want to make songs, and because my introduction to like making music was through electronic music, and so and we called if you go to a if you listen to an electronic music artist, they're a DJ. So I was like, well, I presumably like Skrillex and deadmau5 and Daft Punk, they must all use like DJ decks to make their songs. I was like, how do you do that? I had the same thing where I was like, what the hell? So I was
Yeah.
convinced that all I'd need was like a 30 quid like USB DJ mix. It's like, well, I can make music now. But yeah, so it was on. So Audio Tools on the
Exactly.
Gadget Show, and you realised you had the kind of bing.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I can make music on a computer. Weird. Okay, let's try that then. And I think the first song I ever put out through that system was in 2011.
10 years ago.
Yeah, so I guess that would. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I would have been about 14 years old then.
Crikey, yeah, because that I'd say that site did a lot for me. At least, like, really kind of, I don't know.
Same.
Yeah, I feel like it doesn't get enough credit sometimes, but damn, I really kind of like I just do you know what I remember because I'm a bit younger than you. I remember writing a song on there which consisted of 808 drum beat going, and because I didn't know, I think it was the pulverizer or something. I only knew how to get a sine wave out of it, and so it was about a 60-second song where it went C D C undo, and I downloaded it and I sent it to Skrillex's record label. Like, this is going to be fucking amazing.
Oh my god.
But for me, I was
Oh
like,
my
oh my,
god.
like, but for
They're
me,
gonna
just
eat
doing,
these up. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, holy shit.
That was enough. You've done it. Yeah.
So I was signed later that week, and
Wow.
then, then I, I must have been 11, and I was convinced that, man, I'm going to rock the world with this. But no, it's through kind of like that free software like Virtual DJ and Audio Till that really I was like, damn, this is cool. I feel like a pro now. And even though I look back on the songs I was making, it was absolute shit. But but what I like about it and what I still feel like has been a constant throughout it has been it's been fun and creative, and I've been like, oh, I can do this, I can do this. I think the only thing that has changed actually is is more anger at myself. If anything, back then I was like, well, this is perfect, and now I'm like, this is terrible, which I find funny.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I suppose so you grew up in a really musical household. Let's dive into the DNA. What were you raised on? What were the kind of the core tunes that you go down in the kitchen in the morning and you're like, oh, you know what you've been hearing?
This is the interesting thing.
Bring it.
To an extent, I didn't realize that. I guess it is a musical household, but it's. I don't think I ever had a direct musical upbringing. It wasn't as if there was like records always playing in the house, or that there was like my dad did own a record player, but it wasn't like, oh, every time we had dinner or something was put on, or it was just always going. That was kind of like, don't touch that because you're going to break it. And I guess in a more simplistic sense, my parents were just always very chill with anything you wanted to pursue, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
So my eldest brother, he was like the first in the family to really go like, oh, music, this is great. So he had like guitar lessons at school, then had private tutored lessons. He was in loads of bands. He still is in a band right like this moment, even though he works in like the finance sector, but like does a band stuff on the side. And my eldest sister, she can sing quite well, but it's not like something she does as any part of a career. So everyone, I think, in my family just enjoys music wholeheartedly. But what I was raised on, I think it was just a lot of pop.
Yeah.
In the weirdest way, yeah. And I guess having a large family, going to parties was quite normal, and having a group of 6, I guess, plus my parents, 8 people at a party, you've already brought basically a small party to a larger party. So I was always, in a weird way, always hearing the classic cheesy songs that would come out at parties, but really those are good tunes. It's a lot of disco. It's a lot of just things where people come together and dance and just have a good time. It wasn't as if I was raised as like you got to listen to all the rock records, or as my dad was all heavy on Zeppelin or things like that.
Yeah.
The big irony though was that my eldest brother Stuart, he when I first got my red iPod Nano, uh, I was like, what do I put on it? Like, what music have I really been collecting at that time? I would have been young, probably, yeah, maybe even younger than 14. I'm not sure.
Okay.
He just was like, oh yeah, I'll help you out, and then just dumped a load of music on it of his that he enjoyed. And looking back, that's a weird mix of stuff that he put on there that I guess at the time I didn't think I was really into. I enjoyed my French house, Daft Punk, uh, which then slowly progressed into some heavier electronic stuff. But definitely with the help of my brother, he was a big rock guy and a lot of heavy rock. So I had like Coheed and Cambria on there, among other things. But then also, I think the perfect crossover stuff that I was like, ooh, I still have like fond direct memories of Voodoo People by The Prodigy, the Pendulum remix, because it felt a little bit like it wasn't played on the radio, but it was everywhere.
Yeah.
Of anyone who was into stuff that was slightly aggro, you always heard that do 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 do, and it just everybody knows that. Just
It felt
everyone
kind of
starts
almost
running.
like,
You just
yeah, it almost felt like
go
naughty in
heavy.
a way. Like I found with the Prodigy's music, but
Yeah.
it was like, oh, this is a bit edgy and a bit sexy and a bit wild. I shouldn't really be listening to this. But yeah, this song's got the word
Oh,
bitch in it.
absolutely. No, that was exactly it, and it had that quality that was just like, oh, what are these sounds like? I guess there's a lot of music from the 70s and 80s where you heard synthesizers, so it's not as if we were that older audience that synthesizers were a new sound, but it was now like, I haven't heard a song that sounds that angry or that loud, or how did they even do that thing?
Yeah,
It's like I still have memories of when dubstep was still a fresh thing in everyone's ears, and you heard like even something as nowadays we'd say is like commercial of like Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites by Skrillex, but you hear that first drop on that title track and you go, wow, how did you? I don't
yeah.
even understand what I'm hearing,
Oh yeah, I
which was
remember when I
in a
first heard that
way
track.
so
I was
refreshing.
like, yeah, I remember when I first heard that track, and I hated it to begin with. I was like, what the fuck is this? But no, because I had a really I was raised on kind of funk soul disco and kind of early hip hop like electro, like I went to the
Yeah.
shops and I bought that's kind of the stuff I
Yeah.
was raised on. And so yeah, I know I had a bit of a boomer attitude, I guess. But equally because my mum listened to was kind of like really into AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, and a lot of metal. So I could kind of like get in with the this is kind of like metal, but for cyberpunks.
Mm.
That's what was in my head. But no, I get you. It was a really weird time where it was like, whoa, this is new, and I know I'm what I like about kind of like new genres forming. So, for example, if I was to take the idea of like hyperpop, so Sophie, Charlie XCX,
Absolutely.
but those kind
Mm.
of cool cats. Um, I I like it when a genre comes along and it completely it just sounds so different. I love evolution. So how like how hip hop's evolved over the past 20-25 years. But I love it when something just pops up over the course of a year. And it's like, you haven't heard this before. And it's like, no, I haven't heard this before. Where
Mm-hmm.
there is no evolution, it's just straight from like, or at least there's no perceivable evolution to a consumer's ears. It's just, wow, this is new. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's scary. It's also, yeah, it's frightening, but maybe is what is needed. And it's interesting. And maybe it's like just what happens when you get older. But it makes so much sense for s- groundbreaking stuff to be led by young people, only because when I was young and I heard, like, yeah, something as wild as dubstep or something like that that was new, or even earlier like complextro and stuff like that, I was just like, wow, what is that? That's cool. But now I'm old, like even just a few years older, and now genres like, yeah, hyperpop come around, and there's almost now a slightly stronger air of cynicism, like, oh, what's this then? And there's a
Yeah,
suspicion, and I almost have to like remind myself to bust out that kind of inner child thing of just let go and say, just experience it, just don't go in with anything, just go listen.
yeah.
And like,
No, I get you.
to an
Yeah.
extent, 100 gex is a little bit of a meme, but you hear it and you go, oh wow, that's really impactful, when it like hits you and smashes you around the head and you go, I don't understand what I'm listening to. And it's, you get to that stage and you go, oh, now I can just have fun.
Mm, yeah. That's a real. Yeah. I never really kind of thought of it like that, really. But yeah, you do kind of have to revert to your 14-year-old self again and just be like, let me just enjoy this. Let me. I won't be like a. I won't try and dissect and extrapolate it too much. Let's just enjoy it for what it is. Yeah. No, I like that a lot.
Absolutely.
So I suppose at the moment, who's on your radar these days in terms of who are you looking at and going, you're doing something cool?
All right. So, yeah, it's a little bit funny because a mini aside, as part of my longer just musical things that I enjoyed, I can't really remember directly what was the inciting incident, but at some point I just had a moment where I just very much got into music, essentially from the 70s and 80s. If I was to trace that back anywhere, that would have been that I listened to French House, really got interested in the fact that they were sampling, then would listen to the original samples, and then ended up enjoying those songs more, and then just stayed in that lane forever. But then that
Mm.
expanded slightly outwards. Anyway,
No,
all that is to say is
I
I
did
listened
the
to a
same
lot
with
of
hip
old
hop.
music.
Yeah, no, I did the same with hip
Yeah.
hop where it was kind of like, oh, they sample loads of jazz,
Yeah.
and I got really into jazz. But yeah.
No, exactly. Uh, and so a lot of my listening is old stuff, but
Mhm.
with that, it actually takes me in weirder places to then find new things, because I'm not necessarily going straight down into the, oh, what's this pop album and then whatever, but going through who is making music that sounds a little bit like them, but also it's nowhere near it. Plus, as a person who produces stuff, I spread like almost laterally of other producers who do stuff, and I'm like, oh, but I like what you're doing. All that is to say is, Master Soul Boy. It's a guy
Okay.
based in, I think it's like Leicester. He who is making some killer like R&B, like modern funk R&B sounds that are just like so killer. Been loving that. Trying to think who would I keep an eye on right now? I guess slightly more obvious choices that are funky and fun and new would be like Corey Wong, who just seems to be unstoppable in the amount of music he can put out in a given time.
Yeah.
In 2020, he put out like uh 4, 5 albums, and they're not just like
Crikey.
half-assed attempts; they are full albums,
It's like
which
King Gizzard and Lizard
shocked
Wizard when
me.
they had that year where it was about five
Yeah,
albums. I was like, oh, you
yeah,
bastards. Yeah, I'm struggling to put out 3 songs a
yeah, and
year.
it's exactly, and it's I'm annoyed because they're still good, and I'm like, oh, at least one of
Mm,
these would have to be, they'd have to suck, and then I'm like, oh no, they're all amazing. Um,
it's
so
frustrating.
Corey Wong, I've been really enjoying. Yeah. uh, who else? I've just been trying to keep track. I've got a massive playlist of just when someone says, "Oh, you should listen to that album," I add it to a list, and I have to randomly go, "What am I listening today?" And then just go, "Oh, okay, maybe this one." Uh,
Was it you who did the I'm going to listen to a
yeah.
certain amount of albums over the course of a certain amount of time? How did that go?
Yeah, in 2018, I believe, I set myself a single goal of 52 albums in a year, which
That's
I
okay.
thought, oh, that's doable. That's an album a week. I should be able to do that. There might be weeks, but no, that's easy. And I got to 52 by July. So then I was like, well, I guess I'll double it. And then I listened to 104 albums that year. And so then I thought, well, if I can do 104 albums in a year, what's the next
105.
step? So then I think, yeah, no, I think I added an additional 52. So it was meant to be 156. Turns out, I think that was a little too much of my, like, pushing it too far, where I'd probably get to the point of avoiding social interactions because I had albums to listen to. It was a bit much. So I
No,
think
that sounds like my
year, so
teenage year. It's like,
2019,
yeah, I'd love to
20,
talk, honey, but these
yeah.
LPs are not good. These Aretha Franklin remasters are not going to listen to
Yeah.
themselves.
So I think in that year, 2019, I listened to 127 albums, which is the highest. And then after that, I just said, it was fun, but I don't necessarily need to put that much pressure on myself.
Yeah, of course.
But
Because
it
I
was probably
remember
one of the
you.
best things I ever did for myself.
Yeah, I remember after hearing that the year afterwards, I tried to set a challenge of I'm going to listen to an album a day, which went as well as you can imagine.
No, it's awful. Yeah. No, I've heard
Yeah.
people who've done that thing of like 365 albums in a year, and it is. There's a crossover point in which there are some people who are like, "How can you listen to that many albums?" I'm like, "It's not that hard. You're just wasting time doing other things or whatever." But then you get to a certain point, I don't know where that line is, where you're like, you're having to rejig your life to listen to all the things you want to listen to.
It got to a point where I was like, I fucking hate music. I hate it. Who wrote this stuff?
Yeah,
At one point, I was like, all right, I'm going to listen to some, like a Pink Floyd live album that I had listened. I was like, I fucking hate this band. It got to that point. But no, I guess from that, it could have inspired me to just, instead of like setting myself like the challenge of I will listen to X number of albums over X course of time, I was like, I'm just going to try and listen to as much new music or albums I haven't listened to previously as I can. But I suppose over the course of your challenge, what were the highlights of that? Because it was new albums, right? Albums that you hadn't like previously listened to in full before.
Correct. Yeah. So it was all albums that were new to me, regardless of the year. So it could be recordings from the 20s or stuff released that year. It was stuff that I just hadn't heard, album form. And it was great. There was a level of almost, I think what it was is that at some point, for me, it often felt like listening to an album before I did that, where it was like, oh, you have to commit to that listening to an album. That felt like a big event versus just like, oh, put this playlist on the shuffle and just listen to music and it's just in the background. Yeah. It felt a bit like, oh, almost to the point where I wouldn't listen to an album. I'd be like, oh, I have to get around to it because I have to do the formal listening.
It's like going to the cinema instead of like watching a sitcom on the telly.
Yeah, but it was like silly because what I was doing was really just holding myself back due to some sort of self-created thing to be like, I can't listen to this album yet. Whereas when I had to listen to them, it was just like, get on with it. And mentally, it was getting rid of the block for some reason that was not me enjoying a full-length project, which is arguably for the longer period of musical history of the music industry, like that's what it's all based around, an album, a single concept, a full understanding of the music in a period of time. And doing that, it was amazing because it was just like another album and you just enter a world and there was no big pretense and get ready. It was just get in there. And it just made me way more chill with the idea. I think maybe a little bit beforehand I would have been like, there was one or two songs like that. I don't know if I was feeling I'm not going to touch it. Where now it's just like, oh, that sounds like a cool name, play. Just listen to it. It removed so many pretenses that made me just go. And it felt great.
I like
and then
that.
I had some sort of mini challenges within there.
Yeah, interesting. So I suppose now, now you've actually got time and you're not committing to 100,000 albums a year. You've been doing a bit of mastering engineering. You've been getting into your craft a lot
Yeah.
recently, because I know that Harry's new EP is on the way that you've worked on.
Yes, Harry Pick, her EP Dying Youth came out just last Friday.
Oh, is it? Fabulous. So how was
Yeah, it's it's
so now
it's
you're
out
working
and
with
for
kind of
everyone to
like
listen to.
excellent. So now you're working with like I suppose your clients and stuff like that, and you're
Mm.
because what that is a while mastering is still quite a creative form. Um, you're not mastering SDR songs; you're mastering other people's. How's that? How are you finding that as a kind of as being more frequent than songwriting itself?
It's really enjoyable, actually. What I think is so enjoyable about mastering, because I think many people would look at mastering and say, but it's not as creative as songwriting, not as creative as recording or mixing. What I really enjoy about it is just I could be very like cynical and just be like, I can do more at once. But I think what saying that actually means is I can wake up each day and have a whole different sound world I enter. You know, if you're mixing an album or something, you're very much committed with an artist, and that's a direct relationship, and that is really important. And I imagine that is extremely gratifying. I have mixed albums before, and it is amazing because you live in that world for a time. But in the mastering world, you know, the work is not going to take as long. It's, you know, less than an hour a song, and so with that, you can have a stack of songs maybe from maybe like loads of different artists, and each time you bring a song up and you listen, you go, oh, you're always fresh. There's always something new, and it's been really enjoyable to do that.
I like that. I like that. What was the kind of like story for you of because obviously um, you were songwriting and producing, but how was like getting into mastering? My guess is that that only came naturally with kind of doing everything yourself, and it was like, well, I can master, and then went on that because you studied mixing and mastering at uni, right?
Yes, that is right.
So
Yeah.
what was it?
Um,
What was the conscious decision of like, right, that's what I'm going to do as opposed to songwriting. That's what I want that's what I want to be after my name.
yeah. Yeah. I think there's like two answers, one slightly sillier than the other, but I guess it's actually kind of real,
Go for it.
which was studying at a university, doing a music tech degree specifically about mixing and mastering. There's a lot of people who want to be mixing engineers, like quite a lot. And I understand it because it is a very cool job and it's a very cool profession. And I still would enjoy being one. I'm never going to turn that down because it's very enjoyable. But mastering is important and is still done at a high level to this day, every day, for all like major record labels and things like that. There, you know, it's still a important job, but it seems that it is seen a lot as a little bit of an afterthought or a little bit of a, oh yeah, yeah, you know, and we'll just send it off to mastering, as if that isn't actually going to someone who's getting paid for that work. And it felt like it was almost underrepresented. And I think a lot of people see mastering as a bit of a, oh, I don't know what they do. They just kind of do a thing and then they send it back and it sounds better. Almost a bit like acoustics or something, where everyone just kind of goes, well, that's not my job. I'll let someone else deal with that. Like there's a lot of voodoo around it. There's a lot of people thinking what something is and they don't really know what it is, and understandably because it is complex, but it's a separate work within itself. And I think I wanted to do it because I wanted to. Sounds like a little too hipster, perhaps, but like I don't want to be another drop in the ocean of mix engineers,
Mm-hmm.
because everyone around me was doing that, and as soon as I expressed some interest in mastering, even at my time in university, where obviously I don't know all the details, people were asking me like, "What, in your opinion, would you do in like this scenario for mastering?" And I'm like, it was already clear then that people were mystified about the role and the work, but then too that they did kind of need it. It felt like the right thing for me to get into that position, and every time I did mastering, the more I enjoyed it. So it just felt right for me to continue down that avenue.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that a lot. Yeah. And I wouldn't say a silly answer by any stretch. I think I completely get what you mean. No, I do. Like in the work I'm doing now, because I'm fundraising for for a music venue charity. I It was kind of like, oh, this opportunity has arisen, and that's something you don't often really find. So it's nice
No.
to kind of take a different lane. Because also then I know I find that because I mean for example, every single guest on this podcast is a creative of some form, and a lot of them are songwriters and producers. And so it's nice to talk to people who do different things to what I do, because I surround myself with a lot of songwriters and
Absolutely.
musicians and what have you. Um, but yeah, it's cool to just kind of talk about different things in a way. But yeah, no, fabulous.
Yeah.
So I suppose now, putting your professional and creative life aside, what is the next year looking like for you? Where do you see yourself? What's the next? What does the next year hold in store for you? Not what's definite, but what do you think will happen for you?
That is a great question.
I know.
Uh, it's almost as if this is what you do.
Oh yeah, I'm a professional
I
podcaster.
think, yeah, of course,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
uh, what I'd like for this year coming to be is change in the best way. Obviously, the world has changed a lot, but for me, I have started a new job recently, but that's actually going to be ending in December. So I'll have some money. So hopefully, maybe moving out. But then, if I don't have a job by December, there's a lot of things that I need to work out personally. Uh, the classic life balance everything situation. But I think I'm pointing in the right direction, which coming out of finishing a degree in 2020 and not knowing what the hell was happening for over a year of no job, no, just like what is going on, and understandably everybody else is spinning around in circles saying what's going on. There was a lot of uncertainty, and I almost felt like a pressure. Like there was an image of myself that I saw when I was finishing my degree before the pandemic happened. That I was like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and it's all going to just go mwah, perfect. And then a deadly virus came around and changed
Oh
everything for
yeah,
everyone,
that
obviously.
happens.
Yeah, remember that one? Yeah. And then that obviously changed a few of my plans. uh, but with that came a lot of time, obviously, but also just thoughts about where do I want to go? What can I even do? And that now that things ended up aligning and lots of little things, I think a lot of people in life imagine that there are moments that are like my big break or my big insert moment. And that's understandable because some people have that. And in a lot of media and films and TV that we take in, there is those big moments. There's the single climax in a film or a story. But in the reality, it can often not be that exciting, whatever that moment is, or often they're just little things. Someone says,
Mm,
"Hey, can you help me out with this?" And I'll do this for you. And then someone asks for something else, and the little things, and they all add up to something that is terrific for you in your future. And I'm having to be conscientious of that, that I shouldn't wait for a big singular moment because it's not going to look like that. There
yeah.
might be those core moments, like when I got the job this year, that felt like a singular moment. But in reality, that was a year's worth of searching for a job and also talking to some other people who got me some other separate freelance work and little bits here and there. And I think for a lot of creative people, we really wish that the creative industry was as if you could just sort of hand a CV in and they say, you've got the job as a professional creative person. And some people get that, and we're all very jealous of them. But for a majority of us, it's lots of bit pieces of work for an extended period of time.
Mm,
And coming to terms with that, trying to balance that, because a lot of parents don't really like the idea of you don't wait, so you don't go to there's no singular work, like there's not a office and there's not a you, it can change depending on month to month and there might be a dry spell. Obviously they hate that. So
mm,
having to realize that you basically have to put a lot of fingers into lots of different pies and then see what happens. I feel like I'm in a good place to focus and really get work done coming this next year.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. I don't know, a few years ago, especially when I started out at uni and entering the creative world, I expected, in a way, I suppose it's kind of influenced by normal jobs where it's, oh, I get an entry level position, then I become then I'm a team member, then I'm a manager, then I'm a supervisor, then I'm the boss, and then I make £1,000,000. And we assume, because that's how the world works. But we assume, I assumed with music it'd be like, okay, well, if I start out doing this job, and then from there, because I'll be well known, I can do this job, and then boom, and more money, and then more success, and then eventually it's constant, and then I'm sorted. But it's so much more infrequent, and it's blips. It's not a continual. It's more like a bar chart where it's you got this and then you got this. But then the thing is that I look back over the past, even actually over the past year, like considering the pandemic, I've had so much work, like you doing freelance stuff, getting a new job, working with great people. So once you look back on it as a chunk, I feel like you could be much more proud of it, because when you're in the moment, it's a lot of, I'm going to grab onto this and I'm grabbing onto this, and you can't really enjoy the fact that you got to kind of step back and think, oh, I'm working in the creative industry. That's cool. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I've had that so many times in which I'm like, oh no, I need this one piece of work right now. It's everything I live and breathe for, because if I don't, everything's going to fall apart. And I hardly actually go, I've actually done a fair bit of work this year, or I've actually feel like I've contributed to what I've wanted to do. I, I I find it so funny that it's so easily done. You would think that you'd have way more self awareness in that regard. Like
Mm-hmm.
we should all just be able to be aware that, oh no, we're doing fine. We just keep going that way. And yet, it takes me having to do like those, everyone does like their end of year Instagram top post or whatever. But the one I did last year was basically music that I'd worked on, and I didn't realize, like, I hadn't made any sort of noted list anywhere of what musical projects have you helped. What have you recorded or mixed or mastered, or even stuff that I produced myself. Like, just write all that down. And I was like, oh, I've actually been doing stuff. I thought I was doing F all, and I was like,
Yeah, you just
oh,
didn't
actually,
notice.
yeah, exactly. You're so right in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. So to briefly look into the past, where were you a year ago?
A year
What
ago
was going
to
on?
this day,
Yeah.
I'm gonna I'm gonna briefly open up my calendar, because I have a thing where basically if it's not in a calendar, it will leave my mind eventually and I'll forget. Oh wow, I can see it now, and uh, yeah, I was doing stuff. This is weird to think. I was working on music, and so on the 31st of July, there was meant to be our graduation in 2020, and that didn't happen.
No.
Right, that
And it
just didn't
won't. And it
happen,
won't.
which was like weird to think. Right, it's basically no, and it won't happen. I'm sorry, but yeah, that was it. About a year ago, we were meant to graduate. It was hot summer, and I had a mix due for Alex Edwin, a frequent and long-time collaborator, and a person I'd call a friend. And then few weeks later, I had a big scary moment. I actually remember this very well, that I don't even have to look at the calendar. I saw a friend of mine in a studio getting work coming out of university. It was only for like a few days they were working on a session. It's not like they were hired at the studio, but I saw it and my heart genuinely sunk. And it felt, I think no one really likes to talk about the fact that we are all really trying to be nice and supportive, because the creative industry is frightening and also very competitive, and you get a lot of ego. And I generally like to think I'm a mostly happy and supportive person. I'm always, music and creative things are just happening. But I saw my person I very much call my friend doing this work, and I got angry. I like got quite jealous, and it was so irrational. But I could tell, I was like, they got the job that, like, I wanted work like that. I wanted that thing. I didn't get it, and I really started beating myself up that, like, I didn't plan enough. Right? I should have, when I was finishing my final paper, I should have started sending emails to certain people, being like, "Hey, I'm looking for students," and I fully had like a mini breakdown. Obviously, on top of the fact that there was a lot of emotional trauma from a worldwide pandemic. So I throw that in the mix, and I'm just like, oh, I guess I just failed at everything I've ever done, and I've just made all the worst decisions, and my plan is ruined. And I, I relayed all these feelings I had, and of just like pure jealousy. I would never be jealous of a person like who it was, who I just saw on my like social media feed, because they're doing good work, and it's like, that's great. But for some reason, I couldn't shake this, like, that could have been me because I didn't do enough, and which I think is a classic creative problem that we all think, oh, I could have done more, which is obviously silly for multitudes of reasons. But I relayed all my feelings to my partner, and she said to me, like, why is this like, why is this doing all of, why is it making you feel like that? Like, why is it eating you up? And on top of that, to add all of those things, I also had so many songs of mine that I had just very much not finished, left on the table.
Mhm.
And after relaying all of that, my partner suggested something to me, which was, the song Won't Believe, you've had written in about an 80% done since 2017.
Oh, crikey.
I've had it, it's been that long. I basically wrote the song when I got my synthesizer, the Korg Minilog here,
Oh.
which was in about 2017. And she said to me, you're going to finish this song in a week. And if you don't, like, you can't see me. Like, not as in we're going to break up, but like,
Yeah.
you know, I was planning to go over to her house or something. Like,
So it's like you would have been in
you're not coming
lockdown.
over. Yeah, exactly. I would have had my own personal lockdown if you don't finish this song.
Mhm.
And you're not going to believe what happened. I just finished the song in a week. Like, I just did it. And it was
Brilliant.
the most classic, like, just self-imposed deadline. And I just got it done. I often think about, there's a rule that's used in like a user experience study, was it like UX, called Parkinson's law, I believe, which is that the length of a task inflates with the time given to it. Which basically, if someone tells you you've got 3 weeks to write this essay,
Yeah.
you'll take the whole 3 weeks and maybe do it on the last day. But if someone says you have 2 days to write this essay, you'll finish it in 2 days.
Oh, yes.
Uh,
That rings so
and
true.
so, yeah, right? And so when you have creative practice where the only person keeping track of you is yourself, you hardly go, oh, I need to get that song done by then. You just kind of go, oh, yeah, I'm working on it. Hence how I did the most like crazy thing ever of letting a song go over for 3 years that was already mostly done. And so I was able to, and I looked at my calendar because I wrote each day I'm doing this that day and then doing this that day. I had, yeah, I had it done in, it was actually less than a week. It was 4 days, maybe
Wow.
even 2 or 3. Because I had one day where I just rewrote some lyrics, recorded them, then did a full mix down, and then sent them off to Jamie Pond for mastering. And then it was,
He's on the
and
podcast
I was like,
soon.
oh, it's like that easy. Yeah. And it was that easy for just to have concerted effort. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh my, what have I been doing? Which is why I have to keep telling myself that that event happened, because I'm like, how can I get this music done? How can I ever get all these projects? I'm like it takes, like, you get 80% of the work done in 20% of the time, and then you spend the other rest trying to get that other perfect 20%. And I was like, oh my God. So
Yeah.
that was basically what I was doing last year, was really rushing over what am I going to do with this song, and it just got done.
And it slaps.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a banger.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed it.
Oh, brilliant. This has been a great podcast. I've really enjoyed this. I'm going to sadly begin to wrap things up, but I have one final question for you. I know it's been really, really lovely to talk to you. Yeah, it's been great.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So now, what's going to happen to the world? Are we all doomed? Is this the end of the world? At the beginning, I asked you how you were enjoying the end of the world, but are we doomed? Is this the end? Are we looking at death relatively soon? We always finish on a high note here at the Rona Chats, and that's because I've got COVID and I'm depressed, so therefore I get to offload that onto you guys. So no, I'm okay, but like. What's going on? I need the Shaw Reymont breakdown of are we fucked?
If there's one thing that I've seen throughout history, as if I'm some sort of 600-year-old wise man,
I thought you were.
It seems that with it seems that with the course of human civilization, if there's one thing that humans are good at, it's persisting. No matter what the hell happens, we've experienced the worst natural disasters ever, the worst wars ever. Just all things that have gone bad have already gone pretty bad. I don't really like the idea of having to break those records. I like to keep them where they were. But it seems no matter what, we keep surviving, we keep living. So
you think there'll be humans on the planet in a year's time?
Just about.
Just about. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for talking. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Where can the lovely folks at home find you and listen to you and such?
Go to my Instagram, which is at Shaw is Sure. This is the most awkward name, actually. SHAW is SURE. It's easy for American accents to say, which would be like Shaw is sure, but Shaw is sure. It's a pun in the UK. Go look for SDR on Spotify, maybe.
Yes.
Which would be, look for like Won't Believe or Love Under Pressure.
Yeah, you can find it in the description.
It's a fun song. Oh, thank you.
Lovely.
Yeah, other than that, I'm just about.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming along. Those of you listening at home, stay tuned for tomorrow's episode where we have the one and only Chef, who's going to be talking to us about his new music. Yeah, I know, Chef's on. So you can enjoy that. And then feel free to check out the other episodes where we've got Lex from Hex, we've got Leon Parsons and Omar Sleeman. Thank you very much for coming and listening. This has been the Rona Chats. See you next time.